I met Jessica at a tech conference in Seattle. As a software developer, I was immediately drawn to her intelligence and passion for financial planning. We dated for 3 years before moving in together. Since she was an accountant, I trusted her completely with our finances. We created a joint account where I deposited 80% of my salary every month. I never checked the balance, assuming Jessica managed it properly while we saved for our dream home. Before I tell you how my world collapsed when I bought our house, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover a painful truth. My name is Edmund Sullivan, a 32-year-old software developer born and raised in Boston. I always considered myself a logical person who made reasonable decisions based on facts and evidence. My career in software development was thriving at a mid-sized tech company, where I had worked my way up to senior developer within 5 years. My life was comfortable, but somewhat predictable, until I attended that fateful tech conference in Seattle where everything changed. The conference was focused on innovative solutions for financial technology, and during a breakout session on secure payment systems, I found myself seated next to Jessica Winters. She had striking blue eyes that seemed to analyze everything with precision, and when she asked intelligent questions about the blockchain security protocols being discussed, I was immediately intrigued. During the coffee break, we struck up a conversation that continued through lunch and eventually dinner. Jessica worked as an accountant at Anderson Financial Partners, one of the most prestigious firms in the Pacific Northwest. Her expertise in financial planning and investment strategies was impressive, and our conversations flowed effortlessly from technology to finance to our shared love of hiking in the mountains. By the end of the conference, we had exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch despite living on opposite coasts. For 3 months, we maintained a long-distance relationship with daily video calls and weekend visits whenever possible. When my company opened a Seattle office and offered me a position with a substantial raise, it felt like fate was giving us a chance. I took the leap, moved across the country, and our relationship flourished based on what I believed was mutual respect and shared goals. Jessica was meticulous in everything she did. Her apartment was immaculately organized, her career trajectory carefully planned, and she approached our relationship with the same thoughtful consideration. After dating for 3 years, we decided it made sense to move in together and combine our financial resources. Given her professional background in accounting, it seemed logical that she would manage our joint finances. We sat down one evening and created a comprehensive plan. We would maintain separate personal accounts, but create a joint account for household expenses and future planning. I would deposit 80% of my salary into the joint account, keeping 20% for personal expenses and hobbies. Jessica would contribute a similar percentage. Our primary goal was saving for a house in one of the quieter suburbs outside Seattle. As my work responsibilities increased, I found myself putting in longer hours and traveling occasionally for client meetings. This left little time for monitoring our finances, and I was grateful to have Jessica handling that aspect of our lives. Her quarterly updates always sounded positive, mentioning growing balances and smart investments, though she kept the details rather vague. I trusted her completely, never once logging in to check our joint account myself. The first subtle red flag appeared about 2 years into our cohabitation. When I casually asked about specific account balances while we were discussing potential vacation plans, Jessica seemed uncharacteristically flustered and quickly changed the subject. She later provided figures that seemed reasonable, and I dismissed my momentary concern as unwarranted. It was around this time that I first met her brother Thomas and his family when they visited from Portland. Thomas was 5 years older than Jessica, with the same blue eyes but lacking her confident demeanor. He seemed perpetually worried, his shoulders hunched, as if carrying an invisible burden. His wife Megan was quiet, and their 2 children, 8-year-old Sam and 6-year-old Lily, were polite but subdued. During their visit, I noticed Jessica taking frequent calls from Thomas, stepping outside to speak in hushed tones. When I asked about it, she explained that Thomas had been struggling since losing his job at a manufacturing plant. His wife worked part-time at a grocery store, but they were barely making ends meet. Jessica mentioned that she occasionally helped them with small expenses, which seemed reasonable and compassionate. As the months passed, Jessica occasionally mentioned sending money to help with her niece and nephew's school supplies or covering an unexpected medical bill for Thomas. The amounts she mentioned seemed modest, and I admired her dedication to family. What I failed to notice was how she never provided specific details about these contributions. The next holiday season, Jessica purchased surprisingly expensive gifts for her niece and nephew. A brand new laptop for Sam and a high-end tablet for Lily seemed excessive, but when I expressed surprise, Jessica explained that education was important to her, and she wanted to give her brother's children every advantage. Again, I accepted her explanation, touched by her generosity. When we finally decided to begin house hunting in earnest, Jessica suggested a much more modest budget than I had anticipated. Given our combined incomes and the amount I believed we had saved over the years, I expected we could afford something in the $400,000 range. Jessica insisted we look at properties closer to $300,000, citing concerns about future market instability and the importance of maintaining a financial cushion. I deferred to her expertise, assuming she was being financially prudent, though I was confused about our supposed savings. According to my calculations, we should have accumulated a substantial down payment after years of contributing the majority of our incomes to the joint account. When I expressed this confusion, Jessica provided vague explanations about market fluctuations and investment timing that I did not fully understand, but accepted because of her financial background. The first real disappointment came when we met with a mortgage broker. Based on our income, we qualified for a loan much smaller than I had anticipated. The broker seemed surprised when reviewing our savings, making a comment about expecting more substantial assets given our professions. Jessica quickly explained that we had chosen to invest in more diverse portfolios rather than keeping liquid cash, which satisfied the broker, but left me with lingering questions. After months of searching, we found a modest 3-bedroom house in a developing neighborhood. It was significantly less impressive than the homes owned by my colleagues, but Jessica assured me it was a smart purchase that would appreciate in value over time. I swallowed my disappointment, reminding myself that our first home did not need to be our forever home. As we proceeded with the purchase, I noticed Jessica seemed unusually anxious about the closing costs. She suggested we pull from our emergency fund rather than liquidating any investments. When I asked about the specific balance of that fund, she again provided only vague answers. Something felt off, and for the first time in our relationship, I began to question her financial management. The night before signing the final paperwork, while Jessica was taking a shower, I decided to check our joint account for the first time in years. My hands trembled slightly as I logged in using the password we had established years ago, but that I had never actually used. What I saw made my blood run cold. The balance was barely enough to cover the closing costs, let alone represent years of diligent saving. Heart racing. I navigated to the transaction history and downloaded the statements from the past 24 months. As Jessica continued her shower, I scrolled through page after page of large monthly transfers, all going to the same account. The amounts varied between $2,000 and $3,500, occurring consistently on the 15th of each month. I did not recognize the account number, but I did recognize a pattern. The transfers had begun shortly after I met Thomas and his family. With growing dread, I cross-referenced the dates of larger transfers with what I could remember about Thomas's situation. A $5,000 transfer coincided with when Jessica mentioned Thomas needing emergency dental surgery. Another large transfer aligned with when their car reportedly broke down. When Jessica emerged from the bathroom, I confronted her with my discovery. Her face paled, but she quickly composed herself. At first, she tried to deny any impropriety, suggesting that these were investments she had made on our behalf. When I pressed for details, her denial crumbled. In a voice barely above a whisper, Jessica admitted that she had been supporting Thomas's family for years. His job loss had been more devastating than she had let on. He had developed depression and anxiety that made finding new employment challenging. His wife had taken on additional hours at the grocery store, but with 2 growing children and mounting medical bills, they were drowning financially. I sat in stunned silence as Jessica detailed Thomas's hardships. His health insurance had lapsed, leaving them with substantial medical debt when he required treatment for severe back pain. Their daughter Lily had been diagnosed with a learning disability requiring specialized tutoring. Their mortgage was underwater after the housing market fluctuations, making it impossible to sell their house and downsize. With growing horror, I calculated the total amount diverted to Thomas's family over the years. The figure exceeded $120,000. My money. Our money. Money that should have been building our future together. When I expressed these feelings to Jessica, her demeanor changed from apologetic to defensive. She straightened her back and looked me directly in the eyes. Thomas is my brother Edmund. He has been there for me my entire life. When our parents died, he took care of me, made sure I could go to college, supported my dreams. How could I not help him when he needed me? Her voice grew stronger with each word. But this was our money, Jessica. Money we earned together for our future. You had no right to make these decisions unilaterally. I countered, my voice rising with frustration. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but they seemed more like tears of frustration than remorse. I never should have had to hide it. You should have understood that family always comes first, no matter what. That statement hit me like a physical blow. In her mind, I realized I was not family. Despite years together planning a future, buying a home, I remained an outsider whose opinion on major financial decisions was unnecessary. The foundation of trust I thought our relationship was built upon crumbled beneath me. Over the next few days, my anger and sense of betrayal deepened. Jessica and I had multiple heated arguments about financial transparency and what it meant to be partners. Each conversation exposed new layers of deception. Jessica had been deliberately vague about our finances to conceal the transfers. She had steered us toward a less expensive house, knowing that our savings had been depleted. I demanded that she stop the payments to Thomas immediately. We had just purchased a house and needed to rebuild our financial security. Jessica refused, claiming I simply did not understand the concept of family loyalty. Thomas needs our help, Edmund. His children need our help. I cannot and will not abandon them, she insisted. Then you should have been honest from the beginning. We could have discussed a reasonable amount to help them, not this unlimited drain on our resources, I argued. Jessica scoffed. You would have said no. You would have put arbitrary limits on what my family deserves. Her words revealed a fundamental lack of respect for me as a partner. In her mind, I was not capable of compassion or generosity, merely an obstacle to overcome in her mission to support her brother. Unable to reach a resolution with Jessica, I decided to meet with Thomas directly. Without telling Jessica, I drove to Portland one Saturday morning. The address I had for Thomas led me to a well-maintained house in a pleasant neighborhood, not the struggling environment I had imagined based on Jessica's descriptions. Thomas was surprised to see me, but invited me in. His home was modestly furnished but comfortable. The children I remembered as subdued were now playing happily in the backyard on an elaborate play structure that looked relatively new. When I explained the purpose of my visit, Thomas appeared genuinely confused. Jessica told you about the financial support, right? We have been so grateful for your generosity all these years. His words confirmed my worst suspicions. Thomas, to be completely honest, this is the first I have learned about the extent of the support Jessica has been providing. Thomas's face paled. But we have been receiving regular transfers for almost 4 years. Jessica said you both had agreed to help us while I got back on my feet. We spent the next hour comparing notes. Thomas had indeed lost his job 4 years ago and struggled with depression afterward. Jessica had initially offered temporary assistance, but the support had continued and expanded over time. What shocked me most was learning that Thomas had not actively sought new employment for the past 2 years. Jessica said your financial situation was so strong that there was no rush, he admitted sheepishly. She encouraged me to focus on my health and the children rather than taking any available job. When Thomas's wife Megan returned home from shopping, her reaction revealed another layer of deception. She had believed the support was temporary and had been encouraging Thomas to find work. She was horrified to learn how much money had been transferred over the years. We would never have accepted that kind of help, Megan insisted, visibly upset. We were grateful for assistance during the worst times, but this is excessive and inappropriate. I drove back to Seattle with my mind racing. Jessica had not only betrayed me, but had enabled a situation where her brother remained dependent on our support rather than rebuilding his own financial independence. When I confronted Jessica with what I had learned from Thomas and Megan, her demeanor changed from defensive to angry. You had no right to go behind my back, she snapped. Those are private family matters. They stopped being private when you used our joint money without my knowledge, I countered. Thomas thinks we are wealthy enough to support his family indefinitely. Did you ever plan to stop the payments? Jessica's silence was answer enough. She finally admitted that she never intended to discontinue supporting her brother. I deliberately suggested a less expensive house, so we could continue helping them, she confessed. I knew if we stretched our budget with a larger mortgage, it would limit what I could send to Thomas. Her calculated deception stunned me. This was not a temporary lapse in judgment, but a years-long campaign of financial manipulation. The conversation escalated into our worst argument yet. Jessica presented me with an ultimatum: accept her family obligations as part of our relationship or end things between us. When I suggested a compromise, a smaller, reasonable amount of support that we both agreed upon, she dismissed the idea outright. You just do not get it, she said, her voice cold. You are being selfish, trying to control money that should help people who really need it. That accusation that I was selfish for wanting control over my own earnings was the breaking point. I realized then that Jessica would always prioritize her brother's needs over our partnership, that she felt entitled to make unilateral decisions about our joint finances, and that she would never see her actions as a betrayal. In that moment, I knew our relationship could not be salvaged. The foundation of trust had been irreparably damaged. I needed to take immediate action to protect what remained of my financial security. The next morning, I contacted a financial advisor recommended by a colleague. The advisor helped me assess my situation and develop a plan to separate my finances from Jessica's. I opened a new individual account and redirected my direct deposits immediately. On the advice of an attorney, I documented all the unauthorized transfers Jessica had made from our joint account. While the money had been transferred with my implicit consent by virtue of the joint account arrangement, the attorney advised that the scale and secretive nature of the transfers might constitute financial abuse. The hardest conversation was telling Jessica I wanted to end our relationship. Despite the betrayal, despite the anger, I still had feelings for her. We had shared years of what I thought was mutual respect and care. Disentangling those emotions proved far more difficult than separating our finances. I do not understand why you are being so extreme about this, Jessica said when I told her my decision. Every family has financial disagreements. This was not a disagreement, Jessica. This was a deliberate deception that lasted for years, I explained. I cannot build a life with someone who does not respect me as an equal partner. Jessica's family reacted predictably. Thomas called repeatedly, alternating between apologies and accusations that I was abandoning them in their time of need. Jessica's cousin, whom I had only met twice, sent a scathing email about my lack of family values. Even Thomas's children were encouraged to send messages asking why Uncle Edmund did not want to help them anymore. The manipulation was transparent, but still painful to endure. I maintained firm boundaries, explaining that while I sympathized with their situation, I was not responsible for supporting an entire family that was not my own, particularly without my knowledge or consent. The house we had purchased just weeks earlier became a painful reminder of the deception. After discussion with my attorney, we decided the cleanest approach was to put it back on the market. Fortunately, the Seattle housing market was strong enough that we did not lose money, though we did not make any profit either. In the months that followed, I struggled with trust issues that affected every aspect of my life. I became obsessively vigilant about my finances, checking accounts daily and questioning every expenditure. I was reluctant to date, fearful of being manipulated again. The betrayal had shaken my confidence in my own judgment. Friends proved invaluable during this period. My college roommate Mark, who had always been skeptical of Jessica's vague financial reports, helped me recognize that the relationship had been unhealthy in ways I had not acknowledged. My colleague Sophia introduced me to a support group for survivors of financial abuse, where I met others who had experienced similar betrayals. 6 months after the breakup, I began to regain my equilibrium. My perspective on financial independence had fundamentally changed. I no longer viewed money merely as a tool for building a future, but as a reflection of personal boundaries and values. I established clear financial principles for myself and vowed that any future relationship would be built on complete transparency. Rebuilding my savings was a slow process. The loss of over $100,000 was not something I could recover quickly, but each month of disciplined saving represented a step toward reclaiming my financial security. I developed a comprehensive plan with my financial advisor, focusing not just on recovery but on creating safeguards against future vulnerabilities. Nearly a year after discovering Jessica's betrayal, I met Alexandra at a community volunteer event. Our relationship developed slowly as I cautiously shared my experience and the lessons I had learned. Alexandra appreciated my openness about finances and reciprocated with her own transparency. For the first time, I experienced what a truly equal partnership felt like, where major decisions were discussed thoroughly and mutual respect was demonstrated through actions, not just words. The experience with Jessica had taught me to recognize red flags I might previously have dismissed. When someone is reluctant to provide specific details, when they deflect direct questions, when they make you feel unreasonable for asking for transparency, these are warning signs worth heeding. I learned that true partnership requires honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. While family is important, a healthy relationship balances family loyalty with responsibility to your partner. Trust must be verified, not blindly given. Now I am building a life where generosity does not come at the expense of my own security and future. I still sometimes help others financially, but I do so consciously with clear boundaries and open communication. Have you ever experienced a betrayal of trust that forced you to reevaluate everything? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated relationships and the lessons they teach us. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries is not selfish. It is essential for building healthy relationships. Thank you for listening, and may your trust always be placed in those who truly deserve it.